Good afternoon and welcome. Please remain standing whilst the Canadian and Ukrainian national anthems are sung by St. Martin's Elementary School Choir and St. Matthew's Elementary School Choir. Alberta Legislature, and it's really my great pleasure to welcome you all here to the Legislative Rotunda. And can I just open with a big thank you to the school children who are behind me. There's something so special about being led by a group of children who truly are the future of our province and our country, and it is just such a point of pride and joy for me to be able to have you and lead us in the national anthems this morning. I'd also like to welcome a number of platform guests joining us today. Ms. Danielle Smith, the Honourable the Premier of Alberta, Honourable Sarah Hoffman, the MLA for Edmonton-Glenora, on behalf of the Leader of the Official Opposition. Unfortunately, Consul General of Ukraine in Edmonton, Consul General Danilenko, had to take an urgent meeting in Ottawa today, and he was unable to join us, but he passes along his deepest regrets for not being able to join us. Mr. Risha Boychuk, the President of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress, Alberta Provincial Chapter, Greta DeRoos, the President of the Canadian-Polish Congress, Alberta Society, and perhaps the most important of all of our guests today is Mr. Leonid Koronachuk, a Holodomor survivor who is accompanied by his wife, his two daughters, Joyce and Ruth, and a number of their children are here today. It is our great pleasure to have you here with us again as we commemorate such a significant and important event. I'm honored to be with you once again to mark Holodomor Memorial Day and to recognize the many victims of the Holodomor who lost their lives and those who survived. Holodomor means death by starvation, specifically the death of millions of men, women, and children between 1932 and 1933. But their deaths were not as a result of a bad harvest brought on by drought or flood. Rather, they were the careful and orchestrated genocide by the Soviet Union. Mass starvation through state-imposed food requisitions by the Soviet government, which was disguised as collectivization. But much more than that, it was food stolen from the Ukrainian people. The Soviet regime repressed and persecuted Ukraine's religious and political leaders and scholars. It forbade Ukrainian education, language, and cultural expression. Its goal was the elimination of the Ukrainian culture. In the decades since, the world has become more aware of international conflict, and it's my hope that by remembering these events of the past, we can make sure that we work together to see them not happen again. And while Ukraine is once again standing up to Russian oppression, they no longer stand alone. In 2008, when the Legislative Assembly of Alberta passed the law to establish Holodomor Memorial Day, it was making a commitment to annually mark this atrocity and to annually ensure that the Ukrainian people know that the province of Alberta stands firmly with them. I was moved by the words of President Zelensky when he delivered them in the House of Commons during his visit in September of just this year, when he correctly emphasized that it is not enough to choose the right side, but we must be leaders of the right side. And we are. We stand with Ukraine now more than ever. President Zelensky's words reverberated with resiliency, resolve, and national pride. These values are consistent with the values of Ukrainian people throughout history and will continue to lead Ukraine through the current crisis. Slava Ukraini, Slava Ukraine. I'd now like to invite the Honourable Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, to bring remarks.
I'm getting a little one waving at me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and welcome to all of our Ukrainian friends who've joined us here today, as well as everyone here to remember the Holodomor. I'd like to thank those who are joining me up here, the Honourable Sarah Hoffman, as well as the Ms. Orysia Boychuk, Ms. Greta Deris, and of course Mr. Leonid Koronek. I also know there are many members of the Legislative Assembly here today, including Andrew Bochenko, who I believe is the first Ukrainian-born member of the Legislative Assembly who has joined us, as well as our Parliamentary Secretary for Ukraine, Evacuees and Settlement, Jackie Armstrong-Homanek, who's done amazing work in helping to resettle 41,000 Ukrainian evacuees into our province, as well as Ministers Amory, Ellis, Furr, Lowen, McIver, Nicolaides Yassine, Dick, Hunter, Lunty, Pitt, and Van Dyken, as well as I see members of the official opposition. There are many, many people here today who want to show their respects. Death by hunger, those three stark words describe the atrocity that brutally killed more than 10 million men, women, and children in Ukraine more than 90 years ago. The Holodomor was one of the worst genocides in the history of the world, a cruel, senseless, and lingering attack engineered by a communist dictator, Joseph Stalin. Over 2 years, 25,000 people died of starvation every single day. Millions killed, a culture nearly destroyed. And yet for decades, no one is allowed to speak of it. To breathe a word of it meant imprisonment or execution. So the world didn't know. But we know now, and we will never forget. 15 years ago, the Alberta Legislature passed the Ukrainian Famine and Genocide Memorial Day Act. It was a unanimous decision where MLAs of all political leanings stood shoulder to shoulder to ensure this murderous act would never be forgotten and millions who died would always be remembered. It was also a way to honor the many generations of Ukrainians who call Alberta home and contribute so much and in so many ways to our province. This includes the more than 40,000 Ukrainians now in Alberta who have fled the illegal war that's been raging since the Russians invaded Ukraine nearly 2 years ago. To all of you, we vow to always be a good friend and an ally, as well as an advocate for peace and acceptance. Today we stand with our Ukrainian friends, neighbors, and relatives to support them in this more recent act of violence and also say aloud what their ancestors could not. Holodomor was an unconscionable act of cruelty and a crime against humanity, and we will remain vigilant to ensure it does not happen again.
Thank you so much, Premier. It's now my pleasure to invite the Honourable Sarah Hoffman, the MLA for Edmonton-Glenora, to bring remarks on behalf of the Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition. Ms. Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dobro pobачення. I want to recognize some of the other MLAs who are also in attendance. MLAs Wright, Kosaski, Calhoun Stonehouse, Hayter, Batten, Aramanko, Dack, Ip. Did I forget anybody? And of course, Premier, thank you for recognizing all of the members of your caucus in attendance as well. And thank you, Premier, for being part of this partnership and all of us coming together and recognizing the atrocities of the Holodomor. And it is important to remember that the 15-year anniversary, as was mentioned, of commemorating it here in this place, and 90 years since the Holodomor took place. And in those 90 years, we still have survivors here present with us today, and I always appreciate your words, your poetry, and the lessons that you bring. I want to also acknowledge that I'm here because of Treaty 6, because my grandparents, great-grandparents, in fact, when they came in 1905, had the opportunity to homestead in this area to help build some of the infrastructure. Many of you probably drove over the high-level bridge earlier today or will on your way home today. My Baba's father helped build that bridge, and I know it's a point of pride for many of us when we think about the infrastructure, but none of it would have been possible without the fact that we are here on treaty land, so I want to acknowledge that as well. And of course, the Holodomor was an orchestrated famine that brought great suffering to so many Ukrainians, and we know that there are many Ukrainians who are suffering still today. Bishop Mituk reminded me that every 7 minutes somebody in Ukraine is dying right now in the conflict that is continuing there, the invasion, and fighting for independence and self-determination. And I want to also thank the children for their voices and their presence. Being here today is a sign that we are stronger when we work together, and that what was intended in the Holodomor, when that intentional death by starvation was inflicted on a generation of folks, did not succeed. We are strong, we are here, we are resilient, but we always must remember, Vichne pamnya, Vichne pamnya, Vichne pamnya, forever remembered, forever mourned.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'd now like to invite the St. Matthew's School Choir to sing Give Us Hope.
Moja
know that today is a somber occasion, but I hope that you'll join me in thanking the children for singing and reminding us that we are all here for the children so that they will be safe in a better world. I hope that you'll join me in showing our appreciation. I would now like to invite the president of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Alberta Provincial Chapter, Ms. Arisha Boychuk, to bring remarks.
Holodomor survivor Leonid Korovnik, Premier Smith, Honorable Nathan Cooper, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Member of the Legislative Assembly, His Most Reverend Bishop David, Prepodovni Utsi, ladies and gentlemen, and dear children. On behalf of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress and the Ukrainian community in Alberta, I am honored to be here today to both commemorate those who have lost their lives in this senseless genocide in Ukraine's history, and to express to the government of Alberta our gratitude for developing, accepting, and recognizing annually the Ukrainian Famine Genocide Holodomor Memorial Day Act. Home to over 400,000 Ukrainian heritage individuals, Alberta has been a leader in helping our community let the world know we have not and will not forget the single greatest catastrophe endured by Ukraine during Soviet rule. The Holodomor, this is not just a general tragedy of the era. This is part of Stalin's campaign against Ukrainian nationalism. This was murder by starvation. In 1953, Ralph Lemkin, known as the father of the United Nations Convention on Genocide, described the 1932 and 33 famine in Soviet Ukraine as a classic example of Soviet genocide. He went on and said, if the Soviet program succeeds completely, if the intelligentsia, the priests, and the peasants can be eliminated, Ukraine will be as dead as every Ukrainian were killed, for it will have lost that part of it which has kept and developed its culture, its beliefs, its common ideas, which have guided it and given it a soul, which in short made it a nation. This is not simply a case of mass murder, it is a case of genocide, of the destruction, not of individuals only, but of culture and a nation. However, Ukraine's culture, its beliefs, its common ideas, which have guided it and given it a soul, has endured. 90 years later, we continue to endure. At the height of Holodomor, Ukrainians were dying at a rate of 25,000 per day, 1,000 per hour, 17 per minute. The importance of commemorations such as today is that now they can carry even greater significance as Russia continues to deny this genocide and suggests that the Holodomor was just a result of difficult circumstances. Events like today will serve as reminders that the world, that Canadians, and that Albertans will not forget and know differently. Historical realities which are well documented and events like today help to educate, to ensure that such genocides are no longer a part of world history on any continent. The first Ukrainians to draw attention to the tragedy of Holodomor were survivors who fled to the West, like our family, Leo Korovnik. They were initially dismissed by much of the Western political and intellectual establishments. Nonetheless, they continued their efforts in the decades that followed, and all of them, those who have now passed and those who still are with us, our community, our society owes you a great debt of gratitude for your persistence and ability to continue reliving a time in your life I'm certain you would no longer wish to remember. The irony today is that 90 years later, Russia wages war on Ukraine, committing heinous crimes against humanity, and continues to perpetuate genocide on Ukraine by randomly bombing civilians, stealing children, deporting them to Russia, and purposely destroying infrastructure, cutting off electricity and water as the world continues to watch this 1.5 years later. Russia is creating yet another genocide in Ukraine. We continue to speak and advocate to the world Ukraine's losses, just as we have been doing about Holodomor. We will not be silent about this genocide and the genocide 90 years ago. I'd like to thank the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, Nathan Cooper, for annually hosting this event. Thank you. May we continue to do this 90 years later. Thank you to St. Martin's School, to St. Matthew's School, to the String Society for your beautiful performances and being part of helping us keep this memory alive. Ukraine remembers, the world acknowledges. Vічна пам'ять.
Thank you so much, Arisha. Now I'd like to invite Greta DeRoos, the president of the Canadian Polish Congress Society, to bring remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Madam Premier, ministers, members of the Legislative Assembly, our dear Pan Leonid Korovnik and family, our Ukrainian brothers and sisters, special guests all. Today we remember a most somber and tragic historical period for the people of Ukraine, as well as for all Ukrainian communities in Canada and around the world. The famine genocide of 1932 and 1933, known as Holodomor. Words such as historical period, although respectfully expressed, cannot fully engulf the orchestrated, deliberate famine of millions of innocent Ukrainians who perished at the hands of Joseph Stalin's Soviet totalitarian regime. Stalin was determined to exterminate the Ukrainian people and, along with them, their language, culture, will, and identity. Holodomor, although ruthless and inhuman, did not totally annihilate the Ukrainian people. Those who survived exhibited extraordinary resilience, astounding courage, remarkable perseverance, as well as incredible physical and emotional strength. It is these redeeming qualities that have seen the Ukrainian people through Holodomor, the Second World War, as well as post-war Soviet oppression. Ukraine regained its freedom in 1991 only to confront challenges in the 21st century, the most recent and largest being Russia's brutal invasion of Ukraine on February 24th of last year. It is difficult to think that today marks the 636th day since the invasion. The great 19th century Ukrainian poet, writer, artist, public and political figure, Taras Shevchenko, lent his voice to the suffering of his people, defending their human rights and dignity. In his famous poem from 1847 entitled 2NN, Shevchenko eloquently described the plight of Ukraine, which has resonated today. In his Hymn of Exile, he wrote, "The sun goes down beyond the hill, the shadows darken, birds are still. From fields no more come toilers' voices, in blissful rest the world rejoices. With lifted heart I, gazing stand, seek shady grove in Ukraine's land. Uplifted thus mid memories fond, my heart finds rest o'er the hills beyond. On fields and woods the darkness falls, from heaven blue a bright star calls. The tears fall down, O evening star. Hast thou appeared in Ukraine far? In that fair land do sweet eyes seek thee, dear eyes that once were wont to greet me? Have eyes forgotten their tryst to keep? O then in slumber let them sleep, no longer o'er my fate to weep." Although written in 1847, one can see how Shevchenko's words are timeless and prophetic today. The Ukrainian people have displayed in the past and continue to exhibit unbelievable strength, stellar courage, resilience, and heroism as they today defend freedom, human rights, and democracy for themselves and for us all. On behalf of the Canadian-Polish Congress Alberta Society, we stand proudly together with Ukraine, commemorating past historical periods such as Holodomor and acknowledging present atrocities taking place in Ukraine by Russian aggressors. We are honored to call you our Slavic brothers and sisters. May Ukraine be triumphant in her fight for freedom, truth, and glory. It has been remarked that the sunflower, Ukraine's national flower, has become a symbol of resistance against the country's invasion by Russian forces. Its exuberant and lively form represents the antithesis of the destruction now being suffered by the Ukrainian people. This beloved symbol of Ukrainian national identity has become a global metaphor of resistance, unity, and hope, and beautifully expressed today by the children, wanting and desiring that hope for freedom. Thank you for having invited me today. Holodomor Remembrance is an extremely important act that honors and remembers the Ukrainian people who have perished and those who have survived for generations to come. For the victims of Holodomor, may their souls rest in eternal peace, and may their memory live in God's kingdom from generation to generation. Wieczna im pamięć. For the victims of the current invasion of and war on Ukraine, Slava Ukraini.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite our special and honored guest, Leonid Kronochuk, to the podium. He is a Holodomor survivor who now resides here in Edmonton with his wife, Anna. He will read from his poem entitled, My Life in Holodomor.
I just wrote this poem. Excellent. Okay, thank you. My life in the Holodomor. My daily thoughts weigh heavy on my soul. The mind recounts the past events. I daily think and pray about life's goal and hope my mind comprehends. I often think about Ukraine's past, a blessed land that was God-given. We liked it as a swallow likes its net. There was some peace by heaven given. We spoke our language there since ageless time. That also was from heaven given. But Stalin thought it was a heinous crime. For that we never were forgiven. Then Moscow envied our achieving past, for we were zealous, knowledge-driven, but Russia did not like to be surpassed. Once more, we never were forgiven. We strove to have Ukraine strong and free, but Russia claimed we owed her more. And then each day, with such voracious glee, was causing hell, Holodomor. The Kremlin had no conscience and no heart, conspired to play an evil part. But our grandmothers prayed, wept many times, no tears were left in their dry eyes. Still they would groan and softly pray and pray that they would find some food the next day. For their grandchildren surely won't survive. The end was near. Death would arrive. It had arrived, no less. 10 million times kill innocents who cause no crimes. Still shameless Russia looks into our eyes and weaves through Putin bigger lies. Then all those lies tries to disguise by introducing yet another plan. But for our freedom-loving eyes, we see the deeds of Kremlin's clan. That clan continues now for 90 years, and thus deceives some people's ears, not mine. I lived there, saw those crimes, survived. God saved me many times. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonid. We are all better because of you, because of your survival, and the memory of many live on because of you. I know that many of you will recall from last year that Mr. Kronik launched a poetry book that's roughly translated and titled A Collection of Poems, I Lived There, Hungered, and Survived. In memory of the victims of Holodomor, we will now light the candles. I'd invite the Premier, Arisha, and Mr. Kronik to light the candles. Whilst those candles are being lit, we will hear the playing of Eternal Memory, performed by the St. Martin Ukrainian Children's String Society. of silence. Please be seated. It has been close to a century since the Holodomor, and to this day it remains one of the largest civilian mass exterminations in history. This is why we gather year after year. This event must be remembered so that it will never be repeated. I'm moved by the children in our ceremony today, and in particular, the haunting sounds of the strings that remind each of us of the atrocities, the lives that were taken, the children who lost their lives, and the millions and millions of people who will never know the freedoms of today that we enjoy. And at present, around the world, we see significant conflicts, particularly in Ukraine, of Russian aggression, that require each of us to come together and stand firmly against those that don't believe in freedom and democracy, but want to oppress others. All too often in a world of division, that division can shake the very core of who each and every one of us are. But it is days like these, children like this, that bring us together to focus on the things that unite us. And I encourage each and every one of you to take this time that we spent together as a collective reminder of all of the good that we share together, that we stand arm in arm with those who fight oppression, and we stand against those who would seek to tear us down. It's my great pleasure to thank you all for joining us today. Glory to the heroes, Slava Ukraini. May God bless you, and may God bless Alberta.
All rise, please.
No, I stay here.
Thank you. Can we do a photo?